No, you're good. Yeah.
Modern technology has become a total phenomenon for civilization, the defining forces of a new social order in which efficiency is no longer an option but a necessity imposed on all human activity. Jacques Ellul. This phenomenon is prominent in our society, and it is our obligation to use this to our advantage, not hinder its benefits due to a small portion of negative effects, which is why we affirm that social media is necessary for democracy. To properly prove our claim, we must first emphasize the definitions of the statement. If you break it down, according to one Oxford Dictionary definition, social can be defined as being connected with society and the way it is organized. Furthermore, the same dictionary provides one definition of media as the main ways that large numbers of people receive information and entertainment. This is crucial because it disrupts the idea that social media is only derived from apps such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but that it is only determined as a means of connecting with society through platforms that connect a larger group of people. This includes platforms that share information to massive amounts of people, such as newspapers, editorials, magazines, and much more. Moving forward with the breakdown of our claim, necessary is defined one way in the Oxford Dictionary as for something/someone to do something. This is needed for a purpose or a reason. This clarifies the meaning of social media being necessary. It must be understood that we are not saying that it's something we cannot live without, but that social media is available to us right now and it is our obligation to use it for its intended purpose. Technology is constantly improving, and it is our societal duty to take these improvements and use them to better ourselves, not to move backwards and undermine our work and innovation. Lastly, we move on to the word democracy. One definition provided by the Oxford Dictionary for democracy is the principle of fair and equal treatment of everyone in a state, institution, organization. Thus, in order to provide this equal treatment for everyone, it is necessary to have the means of communication accessible, such as social media. By having such free and open communication, we can more easily recognize when the ideas of fairness and equality are not being upheld. In today's age, technology has hand-down become the leading contributor to supplying a faster means of communication. This we cannot deny. Inventions such as the telephone, the printing press, and computers enable information to travel all over the world in a quick and efficient manner that is crucial to communicate in this day and age. In the past 10 years, social media has especially taken a toll on the way we all communicate. Recent apps have given people the ability to post their own thoughts and ideas on the internet, as well as on applications that can reach everyone around the world with just one post. However, with the recent applications changing our communication standards, we recognize that red flags have been raised by questioning the credibility, reliability, and consequences of social media, but the benefits far outweigh the potential cost. Today, we affirm that the affirmative team believes that social media is necessary for democracy because the pros of the mass spreading of ideas and the impact of being able to consume others' opinions and beliefs outweigh the cons of potential fake news and bias in the media. Next, social media is necessary for democracy because it gives an outlet to everyone around the world to spread information at a rapid pace like never before. Respectively, we recognize that the means of fast global communication have been around forever. However, with the innovation of social media, this spread of communication has become faster, easier, and more efficient than ever before. Social media allows for society to participate in the democratic process, which is defined as the process of citizens actively participating in decision-making of the government. In order for citizens to make educated decisions, they need the best method of receiving information we can achieve. The current best method is social media. And the most recent 10 years, apps such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have taken the world by storm, enabling people to connect with people all around the world. Individuals can now quickly get information and news stories of situations going on around them. Lastly, social media allows for the creation of growth of social movements that are necessary for the basic pillars of healthy democracy. Conclusively, we all know how important movements such as Black Lives Matter, Me Too, and March for Our Lives are inciting change and motivating politicians to look at situations affecting their citizens. According to the Pew Research Center, the rise of Black Lives Matter hashtag, along with others like Me Too and Make America Great Again, have sparked a broader discussion about the effectiveness and viability of using social media for political engagement and activism. Most importantly, Pew Research Center states, social media allows a chance for individuals to stand up and advocate for what they believe in. It also allows for those who are younger to be notified on what is going on in the world and find their voice. For these reasons, we, the affirmative team, believes that social media is beneficial as well as necessary for our nation's democracy. Thank you.
The negative team throughout today's debate will be showing you, the judge, that democracy does not need social media to exist and is overall harmful to the system of democracy. The burden of proof falls on the affirmative team to prove to you that social media is absolutely necessary for democracy. Thus, if the negative team is able to provide reasonable doubt by the end of this debate that social media is not necessary for democracy, then the ballot should flow to the negative side. The organization of this speech will consist of 3 points of contention that I will be arguing. You can write these down as: first, social media is not necessary for democracy. Second, social media is a breeding ground for fake news. And finally, that polarization prevents integrative thinking. Before we start, I would like to define a few key terms. First, necessary is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as absolutely needed, required. The example used is food is necessary for life. Essentially what this is saying is that something that is necessary is something that must be present in order for the other to survive. In our case, we will be proving that social media is not a necessary piece of democracy. And democracy is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary simply as a government by the people. The first potential issue goes along with the word necessary, because democracy is a government by the people means that the people must participate, and not only that, but their voices must be heard. The negative team agrees that social media for sure is a platform from which this can be done. However, it does not need to be done through this platform, nor should it be done on this platform. Social media does not give you more of a voice just because more people are listening. Vanessa Bonds illustrates this in an article saying, quote, "In research Madi Resnagad of Western University and I conducted, recently published in the Journal of Experimental and Social Psychology, we have found that people tend to overestimate the power of their persuasiveness via text-based communication and underestimate the power of their persuasiveness via face-to-face communication," end quote. Essentially, our immediate thought is that a post on Facebook or Twitter has the same weight or more weight than actually being present. If what you have to say is so important, then use the means available to you and take the time to speak to the people that actually represent you in office. The second potential issue is the spread of false information that is escalated by social media. Catherine Clayton and other authors from the College of Dartmouth and the University of Michigan wrote a study showing, quote, "Social media has increasingly enabled fake news to circulate widely, most notably during the 2016 US presidential campaign. These intentionally false or misleading stories threaten the democratic goal of a well-informed electorate," end quote. The important part that I want to look at here is the threatening of the democratic goal. Social media has time and time again not only proven not to be necessary, but in fact very harmful to the key essence of what democracy is, that is a well-informed electorate. And what makes it so dangerous is that fake news is rampant in democracy because of social media. The third potential issue is the harm of polarization within groups on social media platforms. The Cambridge Dictionary defines polarization as the act of dividing something, especially something that contains different people or opinions, into two completely separate groups. Likewise, they define the filter bubble as a situation in which someone only hears or sees news and information that supports what they already believe and like. Polarization is enhanced by social media, as people like and follow people and groups with similar opinions to their own, or go to events with people that share similar opinions. In an article published in the Conversation, University of Oxford network scientist Vyacheslav Polonsky states, quote, "Platforms like Facebook and Twitter allow us to surround ourselves with social feeds that not only show us things we like, or that show us only things that we like. We choose who we follow and who to befriend. The filter bubbles we create are exacerbated by personalization algorithms, which are based on our previously expressed ideas. Instead of creating a digitally mediated agora which encourages broad discussion, the internet has increased ideological segregation," end quote. This is harmful to democracy because it creates a deeper separation between political parties and decreases our ability to empathize and collaborate with the other side. I hope that you, the judge, now have a fuller understanding of why social media is not only not necessary for democracy, but also very harmful. It is because of all of these things that by the end of the debate, you should cast a negative ballot. Thank you for your time.
All right, so 2 minutes for Crossfire.
So, for you guys, what is the intended purpose of social media as you defined it? The intended purpose that you talked about in your speech.
Social media is to spread information at a faster and more efficient pace. It's to start social movements. Without these social movements without social media, we wouldn't be as knowledgeable on social movements like Black Lives Matter. It helps you communicate with, also like, it helps younger people know what's going on, people that don't have a voice.
When you're talking about younger people and the spread of information, are you mainly referring to apps that we use, such as Facebook and Twitter?
Yes, like those apps help us communicate and they help the younger people be more.
Perfect. And you said that it's something that we can function without, correct? You mentioned that in your speech, that social media is something that we can function without.
We said that it's not necessary, like you're not going to die without it, but it's at our hands and we should use what's at our fingertips.
Perfect.
You mentioned that you used Webster. We got a different definition from Oxford, and we believe that fake news is initially false information spread by people taking advantage of citizens and the method in which citizens receive information in order to gain influence over them. Would you disagree or agree with that?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
And
so you would agree that the problem is with fake news and not social media itself?
Well, fake news is initially spread by social media, and especially in the way that you define it, if you're not limiting it just to platforms such as Facebook and Twitter, because fake news is spread by all sorts of platforms.
Right. You also said that we should take the time to speak to the people that are in our office, but
Yes,
how
absolutely.
often do you write a letter to Congress and they actually respond?
This doesn't have to necessarily be Congress. We're
Okay,
talking
so what
about
are you
democracy.
referring to?
Democracy goes as far as just your state legislature, or even in your city. You can go and talk to your representatives that live within your county at any time. They have their
Right.
office hours.
But don't you believe that social media gives you a more efficient and quick way to do so? Like if you wanted to tweet something and say...
No, I do not think so. We have...
And time.
Cool.
Good job, thanks guys. Okay, second speakers.
All right. So the majority of Americans nowadays get their news from social media. It's the most efficient way we've ever shared information in the entire world to this day. It's our responsibility as people to use it to our advantage. The core ideas of social media, though, have existed since the beginning of the ideas of democracy. The idea of people coming together, sharing ideas, and comparing information. It occurred since ancient Greece, since Plato was standing in the middle of the town square, talking to people, engaging ideas, and sharing information. It's the social media. Yes, the apps have been around only for a couple decades, or even a decade in some cases, but the ideas that they're backed behind of social networking and of mass media being able to share information on a greater scale has been around for much, much longer. And the idea of fake news has even been around since those days. There was a term coined back in ancient Greece called a demagogue. We defined it as a leader, or it was defined in Oxford English Dictionary as a leader of a popular faction or of a mob, a political agitator who appeals to the passions and prejudices of a mob in order to obtain power and further their own interests, an unprincipled or factitious popular orator. It was mentioned that earlier that in the first neg speaker that fake news is initiated from social media, but it's not initiated from social media. Fake news is initiated from people who are trying to push an agenda, who are trying to share false information in order to gain power and to gain popularity. It's whatever form or medium that's used to share that information has changed throughout the centuries, throughout the years. Social media is just the current way that information is falsely shared. Aristophanes, back in ancient Greece, wrote about a man named Cleon who was able to convince the people of Athens to take over a city that had attempted to revolt, to murder all the men and sell all the women and children into slavery. He was able to convince the people of that city to do it in a single day, and it was talked about the day after that they regretted that, but it was Cleon himself who was described as a demagogue who was able to convince this large group of people, not through any social media, not through Facebook, not through Twitter. There wasn't that sort of technology back then. He was just able to do it through regular communication. It wasn't a problem with, there wasn't a problem with where he was that he did it or on what platform that he did it on. The problem with fake news is about what the person says and what that person who's originating the information stands for. And demagogues have existed throughout history. I mean, most famously Adolf Hitler being someone who shut down avenues for people to learn accurate information and more for himself to spread false information about Jews and about the many people that were persecuted during World War II. And so the idea of fake news has existed long before social media. It does not take social media to allow someone to take advantage of the democratic process and abuse it. That's one of the side effects of a democracy, is that we allow the sharing of freedom, and we allow the freedom to be able to share information, to share ideas, the freedom of speech. And yes, freedom of speech is limited in certain ways, but it's limited in ways that are attempted to help other people and to make them better participators in the democratic process. As far as creating sort of a filter bubble around a person, those sort of social media, I can't think of the word, of algorithms. The algorithms that social media are built around aren't meant to say, here, you like this stuff, here, keep looking at this stuff. That's sort of what it causes, but its original intent was just to keep people on the platform for as long as possible. It's how those platforms made money. It wasn't made with the intent to, here, let's try to polarize everything or try to force people to stay inside of a bubble. It was just meant to perpetuate someone to continually look at their site. The bubbles that we build around ourselves are the responsibility of the individual, not of the social media.
Okay. Next, second speaker.
All right. So the first point I want to bring up is that they, in their definition for democracy, talked about fairness and equality. I have a Pew Research study that shows the demographics of who uses social media as of 2018. So it showed that 81% of people age 18 to 29 in the United States use Facebook, while only 41% of people 65 plus use Facebook. Likewise, 40% of people age 18 to 29 use Twitter, while only 8% of people age 65 plus. This also goes with income. People who make less than $30,000 a year, 66% of them use Facebook, while 75% of people that made over $75,000 a year use Facebook. Twitter, it's 20% of people that make less than $30,000, and 32% of people that make over $75,000. And education-wise, 60% of people who have a high school education or less use Facebook, while 77% of people that have a college degree or more use Facebook, and 18% of people that have high school or less use Twitter, while 32% of people with a college degree or more use Twitter. This shows that the people on social media that are more represented are the people that already have stronger voices in democracy, and people that are usually underrepresented, like lower income people, the elderly, and people with less education are the people who are not as represented on social media and do not have their voices heard as much. I would also like to discuss the formation of groups. The affirmative side mentioned movements like Black Lives Matter and Me Too, and we acknowledge that social media allows these groups to form and allows people to use power in numbers, and we acknowledge that this also gives hate speech a platform and provides tools to a liberal groups. Although social media is a tool that allows democratic groups to form and mobilize, it is also a tool that can be used by illiberal groups to form ranks and spread messages of hate. There is a quote from the Washington Post that says, "These groups, be they white nationalists, neo-Nazis, or what is loosely known as the alt-right, can take advantage of the same features of social media that pro-democracy forces in autocratic regimes do. They have the ability to find like-minded people who may not geographically proximate and can collaborate on collective political action," unquote. So although this allows for great movements to form and for mobilization to occur, it equally allows for hate speech and for illiberal groups to form and mobilize as well. Lastly, about reaching representatives in democracy, a quote from QZ says that social media is not the best way to reach representatives. Tweets and Facebook posts are largely ignored. Ellsworth, who used to work for Congress, tweeted out that in her experience serving as a liaison between constituents and their representatives, she learned which tactics are most effective in getting her team's attention. She argues that social media activism is the least useful because most congressional staffers and their bosses are not reading those comments. Writing a letter you actually put in the mail with postage stamps can be helpful. I'd lastly like to point out that there was an ad hominem fallacy in the last crossfire when she directly asked if Grant had written a letter personally. This was an attack on the person used to divert attention instead of talking about society as a whole. Thank you.
All right, 2 minutes for Crossfire.
Alrighty, so you mentioned just a moment ago that a politician claimed that mailing in a letter and with a postage stamp on it is the most effective way to
Actually,
access the.
she argued that I cut myself off so I could finish. She said that letters are not actually as effective because they can get tossed aside. She says that the most reliable method is to pick up the phone and make a call. So actually talking to people either vocally or reaching out face to face.
Do you believe that social media should be banned?
Should be what?
Banned. Do you think we should
Banned?
get rid of
No,
it?
we're not saying that at all. Our case is not that social media is completely harmful or that it is
But if it was,
ultimately destructive.
but if it wasn't necessary, then we could get rid of it and it would be fine.
Yeah, we could get rid of it and it would be okay.
But we shouldn't get rid of it.
We're saying that social media is bad for democracy, it is harmful, and we're saying it's not necessary. We're not saying that we need to get rid of it. I don't think it's possible to get rid of it because of the way that it is inscribed into society, but that's not just because of democracy. Social media is a global thing. It exists in countries that are not democratic as well.
Okay, do you mentioned earlier about a couple of statistics about the people, wealth, ages that engage in social media. Do you think that those are the same or similar percentages of people who engage in the democratic process?
I think that they are the same groups that have the ability to engage more in democratic processes because of,
Time. You can finish your thought, but that's fine.
because of the opportunities that they already have. It's the upper class people in the right age group.
Yeah, okay, time. Third speaker.
Okay. So I would like to talk about, first I'd like to say how you said that it was a fallacy that she's attacking him. I think it's a very, I think it was not as directed at him. It's actually directed at society as a whole, because if you look at society as a whole, how often do they call their representatives and say, hey, how often do they send a letter to their congressman? They don't often, but they do reach for their phone and they do write and just like vent on there. And they do that more than they're just gonna write a letter or they're gonna go and make them a call. And I'll tell you an exact example of this. So we all know what happened a few years ago at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. If you need a reminder, a classmate opened fire on his classmates, killing 17 of them. So the survivors of this attack leaned to social media. The survivors of this attack immediately went to social media calling for gun control and making it known that they are the ones directly affected by this, by these people not paying attention. This government, the government's job is to protect their people, and they're not paying attention to them. So these kids went to social media and they stood and they asked, "We need gun control. Someone answer me." This led them to be able to talk to their congressman, and it eventually led them to have a meeting with the President of the United States. A professor at the University of Maryland said the students have spoken publicly and received plenty of TV airtime to spread their message, but it's social media, most notably Twitter, where they're most effective in pushing back against pro-gun activists. The students on Twitter have been a wonderful counterpoint to what we now see as the machine of right-wing propaganda. So these children went to their representatives through Twitter. This would not, when have you seen this happen in the past? You've seen it through emailing, through contacting the representatives. They went to Twitter, and this led to a civil discussion with the President of the United States, who might have some of the most power over anyone, especially we know how talkative he is and stuff like that. So they did that. And this brings me to my question, do y'all think it would have been as successful? I do not think it would have. They would not have got their message across or anything like that. And I would like to talk about, you say it forms hate speech. I understand it forms hate speech, but this hate speech is still a freedom of speech, and they can be arrested for it. We've seen it happen before, but if they want to say that and they want to take the consequences, that's on them. But hate speech is going to be there. Hate speech has been there since the beginning of time. Hate speech has been there since people were oppressed in slavery, since women were oppressed in voting, since everything like that. But the good always outshone the hate speech. That's why we have women the right to vote now. That's why we have equality between people. And although we're still working on this equality, we have made great steps, and it's because this hate speech has not been outshined by, or has been outshined by people's willingness to create change. So my peers have also talked about the bubbles that we live in and the responsibility of an individual to get out of these bubbles. Because at the end of the day, these bubbles we're in them. Twitter might come and tell us that we need to see this, and Facebook might say, block everything out. But at the end of the day, it's our job as people, not the social media's job, to go out there and look for more information and to open our ideas and everything like that. It is not the social media's job to sit there and tell a human they can and can't do this, or they should or shouldn't do this. It is the human's responsibility to do that and to use social media as an outlet for their expression. I would also like to quote from a student back on my other point involved in the shooting. Is she said, "The fact is I have to represent our own movement. It's not just me tweeting whatever I want to tweet about. It's drawn back to who I am in the media and to who I am to this country." She's using this platform to show who she is and to show who she can be. And this media also gives people who are minorities, I know you said uneducated and stuff like that, but it gives people who are undocumented and felons and stuff like that who don't have the right to vote. It gives them the ability to participate in democracy and to show people that they can be. And I'd like to finish by saying a world with democracy is more democratic than a world without it. Or a world with social media is more democratic than a world without it.
I would first like to start by stating that we, the negative team, we admit that there are benefits to social media and it is capable of propelling democracy to even new heights as our generations continue to advance and times begin to change. Yes, it assists in helping democracy, but is it a necessity? No. Primarily, social media is a business, and they can be paid to spread false information. In late October 2019, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey announced that Twitter would no longer allow political ads on their network. An article in The Guardian by Julia Carey Wong explains Dorsey's reasoning was the organic spread of political message online should not be compromised by money. He wrote, "The advanced state of digital advertising technology, including machine learning-based optimization of messaging and micro-targeting and deepfakes, fake or manipulated videos that appear real, combined with the pollution of the online information ecosystem with misinformation, present entirely new challenges to civic discourse." This isn't about free expression, he added in a seemingly post to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Recent defense of online political advertising in a speech billed as a stand for voice and free expression. This is about paying for reach and paying to increase the reach of political speech. Has significant ramifications that today's democratic infrastructure may not be prepared to handle. It's worth stepping back in order to address. So you mentioned about how in your second speech how democracy has existed long before social media, and we agree with that as well. It has existed long before that. So in the situation where you brought up in the third speech, where these young people use social media to reach out to their local representatives, let's say we get rid of social media, if they all would have joined in to call in to their local representatives, would they not have had the same effect? If all of them joined together and accomplished that without social media being present, I believe the same effect would have still been possible. Because due to social media being the current most present, accessible source of information, yes, of course, like they're going to use social media. But if that wasn't present, if they really cared that much and it wasn't present, they would be able to pick up the phone and call. That is why this debate is about the necessity of democracy. And would democracy exist without social media? Yes, because it has far long before it existed. I would also like to state that America is not the #1 in democracy. Norway has been rated #1 in democracy, and they say it is due to the healthy relationship between the lawmakers and the people. Not having a separation in power promotes flourishing democracies. Not only can we see from ancient Greece that all of the people were represented because all of them were present, but we can also see a similar structure in Norway, the world's leading democracy. The key to Norway's success is the healthy relationship between its people and lawmakers, according to 27-year-old political advisor Torkil Veteres. Both Norway and Greece value the relational aspect of democracy, which allowed it to flourish. This relational aspect between the people and the lawmakers does not exist in the realm of social media, because the term friend does not just mean a Facebook status or the fact that they follow you on a certain platform. A little bit more on polarization. Sustein points to an experiment he conducted before the explosion of social media, where those in the experiment were intentionally placed in a group where every member supported the same beliefs, Conservatives were matched with other conservatives, liberals, and other liberals. Both groups were asked to debate the same 3 topics. Afterwards, each member had a more extreme view on the subject than before entering the discussion. Those in the liberal group, for example, had already favored an international treaty to control climate change before the study, but emerged more strongly in favor of it afterwards. Conservatives were initially neutral on the treaty, but came away feeling adamantly opposed. This as the Harvard professor explains how engaging only with like-minded people and information can actually widen the gap between different groups, more so than having no information at all. He argues that Facebook and other social networks should be developing a more personalized feed, but rather should seek to diversify the information you see, even going so far to select things you likely would not have selected for yourself. I'll wrap up by saying that social media has only existed for a minimal amount of time, and democracy has existed far long before that, and that is not a necessity for democracy.
Thank you. Okay, 3 minutes for crossfire.
So, you said that we talked about how democracy has been around forever, and we did talk about that, but we also talked about how social media has been here forever, not through just technology, but through people having the means to communicate and create a larger discussion. So you also said that you believe that the kids who could have called their representatives and gained the same experience. So do you believe that, or you know that? Because we have seen that they use Twitter to do it. But like, if you just believe it, that's not the same as we know that this has been proven.
Well, I'd counter that by saying that just because, so let's say I tweet something, there's no guarantee that it will be seen by people, right? Do you agree?
Yeah.
So even it's more a guarantee that if I know I'm calling someone specifically, I'm calling this person, there's a higher chance of them answering than me just tweeting out like, oh, please help me with this situation. We need this. It's far more guaranteed. And I'd like to ask the question.
Well, I was going to say, you guys talked a few times about calling a representative. I just quickly Googled is this okay for me to bring up if I just quickly Googled something? Denton is currently in the 26th congressional district, who's currently being represented by Michael C. Burgess. On his contact page, it gives a list of things and ways to contact him, but under the phone number, it says, please only call the number if the issue that you have is time sensitive. So he stresses in bold that he would prefer basically to contact him through his email, through meeting requests, tour requests, media requests even, before calling him.
So is there a Twitter handle on there?
Um,
Just out of curiosity, is there a Facebook group or something?
Yeah, there's links to his Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram all at the very top of the page.
Okay.
But you agree that using a phone to call someone is not the only way of getting contact with them and to actually be having a personal conversation with them, correct?
Yeah, we think social media is a great way to get in contact with them. We only bring this up because you guys
But you
very much
could
emphasize.
still go in, he has his address, you can go into his office and talk to him
But y'all are the
personally.
ones
would
who
have to
even
set up an
argue that
office.
brought to statistics that emailing them and writing letters to them is not as effective as calling them. So even the best means of
That was not what the evidence said at all.
That's not what it said.
The evidence was saying that calling them and talking to them in person is more effective than sending them an email or than talking to them on social media.
Exactly. So if you're going to them in person, calling them, then he doesn't want to answer. He has his email casework. There's not his home address on here. There's no conference
If he
address
doesn't
for
want
my
to
room.
talk to you in person, do you think that he's going to listen to you on social media?
Okay, well, do you have?
Politicians are becoming more and more
And
engaged in our social
time.
media discourse.
All right. 4th speaker.
Today, we, the affirmative team, have proved to you why social media is necessary for democracy. We have done this by first explaining that social media is not just platforms on technology. It's basically the gathering of many people in a society and exchanging ideas and beliefs. We also discussed how that social media is making it very easy for us to be able to communicate what we believe on different political, social, and economic issues. This is important to democracy because democracy is the principle of government that gives us fair and equal treatment to all of its citizens, and the idea that everyone should have an equal role and voice in government and can participate in these decisions being made. So social media is what makes it easy for us to be able to do this. And social media also gives many individuals, like many people who aren't maybe old enough to participate in government, but they're still able to get on social media and get on their and get their voice out. Also, we've talked about how different movements were created, such as Black Lives Matter and March for Our Lives. A lot of these were created just by simple hashtags on social media, but they've actually gained national attention. And also, social media is very key for us to have a louder voice in government. Many people who are in power do not hear all of its citizens, but if we're able to come together and at least get our equal voice out, like on different movements where we feel the same way, such as Black Lives Matter and March for Our Lives, we're able to get our voices heard because we're such a big group and we've come together. Individual voices are not as strong as multiple voices altogether. We also discussed how fake news is an issue with social media, but it's also not caused by social media. Fake news is information that's created by someone, it's created by an individual, and they spread it through social media. You can't blame social media for creating the fake news when it's just a platform that spread it. Okay, and also we talked about how it's difficult to communicate with politicians through social media, and a phone call is most reliable. But I personally have actually had a project around this time last year where I had to contact part of someone that's in Texas legislation, and I had to kind of have an interview with him and do a report on it. After 3 months of sending emails, making phone calls, and I even showed up to their office and waited for 2 hours, I still did not speak to anybody. But if you look at all these different movements that have been created by social media, you can see how people's certain voices are actually getting out there. And also, democracy requires or it entitles its people to have a strong voice and to be able to be a part of their government. And we believe that it may not be, without social media, democracy would exist, but with social media, it gives the people the strongest and the most efficient way to get their voice out and to be able to speak and get their beliefs out, which is why it's needed, because if we don't have the most effective way to speak, then is that really democracy? And you guys also talked about how hate speech is influenced and kind of, I guess, strengthened by social media. But hate speech is harmful, and I'm not saying it's okay, but it's still free speech. And if we're not able to speak and say what we believe, then are we really in a democracy? And that is why I believe we approve to you why democracy or social media is necessary for democracy.